And I think that we have to have a much broader conversation on a cultural level about what is and isn't okay. And I do think that the relentless fuel, like the business model for surveillance that can be used for ill is advertising. There's no way to get around that. And we're all implicated in it. And every company is implicated in it.
Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hi there, how are you all? Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast, where you get to hear from the best minds in Bitcoin and crypto. I'm your host, Peter McCormack, and this week I have an interview with my buddy, Mr. Long Read Sunday, Nathaniel Whittemore. But first, I have a message from my show sponsors. And do listen, don't jump these. Remember, it's the advertisers that help keep the show going. So firstly, I have a final shout out for the month for Deribit, the Bitcoin exchange for traders. Have you checked them out yet? They have been growing at insane levels. Why? Well, they have been focusing on all the issues traders experience with other exchanges. They have made security central and they have never been hacked. Their platform is built for stability, so they have no system overload crashes like you see with other platforms when the prices go crazy. They can easily support high-frequency trading, and they allow for instant withdrawals. And they have never once had a socialized loss. That's pretty cool. You should probably go and check them out, and they do have an offer for listeners of the podcast. If you head over to deribits.com, that's deribits with an S, you can get a discount of 10% for your first 6 months. That is deribits, deribits.com. And please note, Deribit is not available for US citizens. Next up is my regular sponsor, BlockFi. I recently visited them in their office in New York and met up with their founder and CEO, Zach Prince. Make sure you check out my interview with him to find out more about what they are doing, how they're trying to reshape the future of banking with crypto. Their primary product is crypto-backed loans. So whether you're looking to finance a business or even buy a house, BlockFi can help you use your Bitcoin, Ether, and Litecoin without selling it. They are the leading crypto to USD lender in the US, and they service over 45 states with interest rates that start as low as 7.9%. And they have a special offer for the listeners of my podcast. If you sign up at blockfi.com/whatbitcoindid, you can get $25 in free crypto added to customer collateral loans under $10,000 or $50 in crypto added to customer collateral loans over $10,000. And applying should take less than a couple of minutes. So, onto my interview with Nathaniel. If you don't know him, if you're not following him on Twitter, I recommend you do. I recommend you check out his Long Read Sunday, where he curates all the best news, blogs, opinions into this giant Twitter mega thread every Sunday. It isn't just a list though. Nathaniel carefully knits it together in a cohesive narrative for the week. It's really cool. It's really useful. It deserves a wide audience. So if you don't know it, definitely go and check it out. It was great to get him on the show. I've been talking with him for a long time. We've kind of got to know each other in this weird world of crypto Twitter where you make friends online. We've never actually met. We were hopefully going to meet when I was in New York. It didn't happen, but we will meet up sometime. We share a lot of similar opinions, which is pretty cool. It makes for a good conversation, mainly about the state of crypto, especially with regards to marketing, because we both have a marketing background. But we talk about this on the show. We talk about the problems with crypto marketing, product development, how Nathaniel pulls together his Long Read Sunday, and we also reminisce about some good old punk hardcore, which was pretty cool. Listen, if you want to support the show, head over to my website. There's a section on there at www.whatbitcoindid.com. Only will take you a couple of minutes and there's a whole bunch of things you can do. You don't have to just send money. You can do things like leave a review. So go and check that out. And yeah, listen, I hope you enjoy the interview with Nathaniel. If you do have any questions, you know you can always reach out to me. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Good evening, Nathaniel. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. How's it going?
Yeah, really good, man. It's good to finally get you on, because I can't even remember when we first connected, but this, crypto Twitter is a really strange place. You end up building these friendships with people you've never actually met or even spoken to, who just become your buddy, and you like each other's content and share it. So I can't even remember when we connected, but
no, I don't remember either. I do remember though so the thing that I like about Twitter, especially crypto Twitter too, is like stage one is you kind of have similar opinions about stuff in crypto, right? And then you start to see like where people like let their personalities creep in a little bit too, and you start to be like, oh, well, that, like, I feel like I could like hang with that person on a different level too. So I started noticing like the occasional kind of thrash metal reference coming from you, and I was like, all right, I'm in.
Yeah, I've always been like a big metalhead ever since I was a kid. I used to go to Donington Monsters of Rock, and old Jeremy Welch at Caster's a big metalhead as well. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like this industry is super like conceptually aligned with, I don't know, take your pick, punk, hardcore, or metal, you know, depending on how you feel about things, I guess.
I guess I both. Like, I started out with, like, the first song that got me into it was Europe's Final Countdown when I was about 9 or something ridiculous. And then I Am Maiden got to number one with
yeah.
Oh God, what was the song? I can't even remember the song. No, it's off the album No Prayer for the Dying. So then I got into Maiden, and then I got into Biohazard. Do you remember Biohazard?
Oh yeah, totally. They just came up in someone was tweeting about them the other day, like straight up like venture capital tweets, like mentioned something about Biohazard, and I was like, okay, cool, this is great. Can we talk about like 25 to Life next? Like, we're gonna do the greatest cuts. Let's do this thing.
So you listen to 25 to Life? If you that's proper hardcore.
I was like a movement straight edge hardcore kid in high school.
Did you do the old X on your hand?
I did. I went to probably 500 concerts with X's on my hands, but always with tape, not the actual tattoos, because I was 14 or something like that.
So you must be a big Earth Crisis fan.
Yes, I really like Earth Crisis.
Yeah, I'm a massive Earth Crisis fan. Actually, I've never seen them live, but they are every time they come over into London, I keep missing them. So I did the whole hardcore thing. I just couldn't do the straight edge because I like beer too much, and I tried to, and I wanted to, and I even put the X on my hand a couple of times. And I thought, no, I'm such a fraud here because like I want to be straight edge without actually being straight edge. So, but yeah, no, you're right. There are a bunch of metalheads in Twitter and crypto Twitter. I found that out obviously going to the SEC, stuck my t-shirt on, and then I got quite a few people reach out to me.
Yeah, I love
so
it.
Anyway, man, how are you? You well?
Good. Yeah, we're over here enjoying. We just had our third snowstorm of the year already in the Hudson Valley in New York. Getting used to a new baby. Had a daughter. It's the first kid on November 1st, so we're just almost coming up on a month. But life is good. It's great.
Yeah, I just missed you. I did experience the cold, though, when I stayed in Brooklyn. Actually, funnily enough, the last 2 times I've been to New York, I haven't really been into Manhattan. I've just been staying in Brooklyn. It was really bitterly cold. And yeah, I saw you had a baby. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, she's awesome. It's great. It's a whole different level, as you know. But I'm really liking it so far.
Yeah, you don't look nearly tired enough, though.
She's unbelievable right now. She stays up kind of late. Speaking of metalheads, she's like up until 10 or 11, and it's really hard to get her down before that. But then she'll sleep for like 6 hours. She'll feed again, and then she'll sleep for like another 4 hours. So it's actually like she's kind of on our schedule somehow, weirdly.
With a 1-month-old.
I know. It feels like the other shoe's going to drop, or like it's ruining her health somehow. Like I don't know, but
yeah, it's, as a parent, like my son was great. He did that for 3 months. But my daughter, we had a good year of that. But it goes quick, man. You got to enjoy it. I don't know how it's happened. I've suddenly got a 14-year-old who's taller than me, who's cooler than me, who all the girls like. It goes quick. But yeah, we should probably talk about crypto as well.
Yeah, let's talk crypto.
So listen, I think what I want to do is let's go through the background, because your background's interesting to me because you've had similar job roles in your life. I think we both have some good thoughts on marketing. I don't think that's nearly covered enough in crypto, so we could talk about marketing as well. And we will have to have a talk about market narratives and long read Sunday, because that's become like my crypto newspaper.
Awesome. Yeah, no, for sure.
I don't think I've missed one. So let's do the career background, but I really want to know about the creative side, the marketing roles you've done. I really want to understand a bit about that, and then we'll go on from there.
Sure. So I have kind of there's almost like 2 segments of my life that intersect. So the last 5 years, I guess, or a little longer, basically I spent about a decade in Silicon Valley between like 2008, 2009 and last year, before we moved over to New York again. And so it was kind of in the belly of the tech beast for a while, and had a bunch of different types of roles in that, some in venture capital side of things, some on the operator side. Common thread definitely always being thinking about communications, market narratives. I mean, even the interesting thing is that as a venture capitalists and marketers, depending on the type of marketer, at least a brand marketer, have similar roles, at least in the sense of being able to sit kind of at 10,000 feet and understand what the big patterns are. They monetize it differently. Obviously, for venture capitalists, it's about getting out ahead of trends and finding business models that are going to intersect that future. Marketers, it's about communicating either to the narrative that's emerging or against a narrative that needs to go away, and kind of building a brand with it. But the specific thing I think that's relevant for the marketing and advertising side of the conversation that you and I were starting to riff on is I spent the last like kind of half of that time with a company that was it was venture backed, it was YC, although it always should have been a consultancy in retrospect. It's one of the things that we learned. But we helped big brands, Fortune 500s, Fortune 100s really, figure out what new technology to work with and how, right? So Web 2.0 blossomed and social was everything, and it was too much for advertisers to ignore. There's this whole world of user-generated content and obviously totally new types of data available that help with targeting. And in that, it was just a barrage for all of those big companies around, hey, we have a new platform that does this new thing, or we have this new social channel that's supposed to be the next big thing. And so companies, obviously, you know, the Coca-Colas and L'Oreals and Samsungs of the world want to know which of those things are noise and which of those things are signal and what they're supposed to do with them anyways. And so the company that we had was theoretically a platform where those different types of where Fortune 500s could meet new technology startups. What it really ended up being was a lot of very hands-on consulting of us teaching those companies about what we thought was promising. And so that was kind of the lens through which I started paying attention really to a lot of the stuff in Bitcoin and crypto. We were, you know, we actually went through Y Combinator, the same class as Coinbase in 2012. I was an advisor to the company then, so I wasn't full time with them. But and then we were making videos, like private videos for Coca-Cola about Bitcoin as early as like 2014, just about what it meant. Did they need to care about the Bitcoin itself? Did they need to care about the technology? Yada yada yada. And so so that was kind of a little bit of the genesis. I was side eyeing it, and to be honest, it actually felt like something that was going to be so. I was going to have to pay so much attention to that in the depth and bowels of the agony of trying to make this startup work for a bunch of years. I never really let myself go all the way in, which is interesting. And so when we finally kind of wrapped that, the end of 2016, that's when I started kind of actually letting myself spend the attention that I really wanted to looking into this whole space. I guess the one other piece that's kind of relevant though, and what I found when I did go down is that actually as obvious as the technology venture capital kind of connection is, the part of my background that feels much more lit up, I guess, by crypto and by Bitcoin is what I was doing before. So I went to Northwestern University outside of Chicago and spent the first few years after school designing a center to teach kids how to make an impact abroad. So I was in school just after September 11th, and there was actually a massive increase in kids going abroad to try to make a difference, right? Because you had two reactions, either kind of like, let's be insular and kind of hunker down at home, or let's go figure out what the fuck is happening around the world, right? And there were a lot of them. So study abroad rates went way up, volunteer abroad programs went way up, and what I found is routinely is that there were all of these well-intentioned kids all over the world, both Americans going abroad, but also local communities, and everyone was absolute dog shit at actually making a difference. We were all total trash. And we knew it, right? Like it wasn't a bunch of naive kids being like, look at how good I am at making a difference in the world or pat me on the back. It was people who were really, really frustrated about their inability to be effective and making change. And so we kind of created this program design center, got it funded by the university and then by some external funders as well, to do things very differently, and to take a different approach on making change. And so when I came to Silicon Valley, it was actually, I was kind of on this precipice of either I was going to go to the UK to study the history of British anti-slavery, or I was going to go work with change.org and help them build basically that. So change.org is today the largest petition site in the world. It's got, something like 300,000 members and, offices around the world, and has done some really amazing things. At that time, it was just a social network for social change and one of about 40. And we weren't sure exactly what we were going to do, like what the biggest levers that we could pull aggregating attention were on the internet to make a difference. But we knew that we had to aggregate attention. And so we built a pretty extensive blog and content network around 10 or 11 topics. So like gay rights.change.org, social entrepreneurship.change.org, climatechange.change.org, like really the big stuff. And that was discontinued in like 2010, but it was what kind of got us to the first few million users that were the critical mass. And so anyways, it's a long-winded way of getting around. And I would have thought that when I really dug into Bitcoin and then crypto, the thing that was kind of lit up and triggered was all of the tech stuff, but it wasn't. It was the impact stuff. It was thinking about the world and the systems that kind of drive power. And so what I found myself being is very thankful in a lot of ways to be back, getting to engage with an industry that, for all of the silliness and all of the kind of hype and pomposity and ridiculousness and all these things, is fundamentally aligned with trying to make a difference, like in a way that's way more than just the kind of like "don't be evil" Silicon Valley motto stuff. So, anyways, that's kind of the background for me.
Where does this desire to work on projects which are for social good come from?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I think part of it's just well, there's a couple things. One is I think everyone's shaped by their experiences and what they see around them. And I had my grandfather as a minister, and he spent, big portions of his life and my grandmother's life going all over the world and, being a part of things through their church. And that for me, like, I was never interested in the religious side of it. That wasn't the kind of lens through which I saw the world. But I grew up with these stories of my grandparents went to, Israel and Palestine frequently, and they went to Kenya all the time. And so the world kind of was introduced to me as a place that we were a part of, rather than kind of this thing out there, which I think is a little rare for Americans because America's just so big, not a huge number of us have passports. So I think that was part of it. But then, like, I've always been a person who, we've grown up in a time with total exposure to everything. And, when I got to college, I think there was a really interesting thing that happened in the 90s. So the 90s were, on the one hand, post-Cold War in America, like, we were done, right? Like, capitalism won, everything was good, the world was fine. But it was actually the bloodiest, most violent decade on record since the 40s, since World War II. And I remember having this distinct kind of moment of reckoning or realization, I guess, where, I was learning about Rwanda and the Rwandan genocide in some course. And I was thinking about where February 1994 was a time that I remembered because I got Green Day's Dookie. Like, I got that album, and that was like that was kind of like a home base record for me. And I remember the difference in thinking about those two experiences. And from that kind of moment, I was like, well, fuck it. I want to go, like, I have the opportunity to go be a part of the rest of the world and see it and try to kind of rub my nose in it a little bit, and I'm going to take it. And then it's very, there's a positive feedback loop between deciding to pay attention to things and going out and experiencing them and adding personal connections and relationships into it that just gets very cumulative and spirally. So I feel like, if anything, actually, a lot of the time I spent in San Francisco was kind of a distraction for myself. And, it wasn't bad. It taught me a lot of things, and it was a really valuable experience. But it's kind of hard to, it's surprising actually that I was as okay as I was for as long as I was trying to teach Coca-Cola about whether they should use Snapchat or whatever the newest thing was.
I guess, the Rwandan genocide was truly shocking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if you've got a conscience and you're reading about that, and then you're trying to choose whether to work for social good or, like you say, teach Coca-Cola about Snapchat, it's a difficult thing. And I had a similar thing as well with because I was working in advertising. I've sent you my article I wrote about online advertising not working, and I kind of hit this moment where I was in a all agency meeting with one of my clients who are a cruise company, and essentially, cruise liners, they travel around the world pumping, huge amounts of fuel into their ships to keep them going. They're highly pollutant. And we were in this meeting, just all different agencies, the PR, the advertising agency, us, the digital agency, just brainstorming these just stupid ideas. And I think one of them came round. There's a shop in London called Selfridges. It's a huge department store. It's a bit like, what's the one in New York? The really famous one. Is it Macy's or something?
Yeah.
It's like a huge one. And they wanted to turn that into a ship,
mm-hmm.
and make the whole store look like a ship. And I just sat there thinking, what am I doing with my life here? Or I spend my day trying to help people buy shit they don't need. So I kind of understand that.
And listen, I think, like, one thing that I feel very strongly about, and it was interesting. Even when I was sort of in the impact world, I knew for a fact that I didn't have the DNA to go be like a nonprofit leader. And there are a bunch of reasons for that. But I felt very strongly, and part of the reason that I actually liked building programs for students is that I don't think there's such a thing as a right way to be involved in the world or a wrong way, right? Like, we didn't have the word or the critique virtue signaling back then, but our programs were very much like, so actually, I guess it's best described with an example. So the first program that we did was a summer study abroad program that sent about 20 kids to Uganda to go live with and work with community organizations there. So the idea was that we were like, look, like community, development work isn't this glamorous thing with like drinking at bars with warlords, although sometimes it is. It's really like gritty, shitty, stupid, often like boring secretarial work and just like trying to keep the lights on and stuff. And so rather than kind of being like, oh, you're going to go make a soccer field or something that was like designed for those kids to make them excited, our whole theory was we're going to put you down in teams of 5 so you have enough labor and time on task over the course of the summer that maybe you'll do something interesting, but it's your job to figure out with this organization what you're going to do, even if filing paper is the most useful thing for you. And so after that, about 10 people, so all 20 thought that they wanted to go into international development after college. That was their intention before that summer. And when they came back, 11 out of the 10 or 11 out of the 20 said that was no longer their intention. And I had professors who were like, does that mean that your program wasn't a success? I was like, it's exactly the opposite. That means that's 11 kids that aren't going to waste time and resources on fucking Peace Corps or something like that, or are going to figure out that their best way to make change is actually to go into advertising and to get Coca-Cola to subsidize its, a portion of its trucks for refrigerated medicines or whatever it is, right? Like there really is, it takes all types. There's a million different ways to make impact. But I do think that there are these moments that you have when you're working on shit that is completely irrelevant. And I think that it's more pronounced in the advertising industry, but perhaps everyone has it, where you can't kind of be like, all right, well, I don't need to go save the lions, but Jesus, what am I spending my time on? And I certainly had a lot of those moments over the last couple of years that I was working on my company for sure.
And you're essentially, like, the root of it, you're a consultant, right? Like I'm a consultant. That's what I consider myself. I look at the stuff you've done. You're a consultant, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about the work you're doing now, and then so I get a picture of where you're currently at.
Sure. So with when I kind of ended this company, I knew that I wanted to do just independent communications consulting. And for me, what that means is that the part of communications and marketing that I really like is helping companies understand two things, I guess. One is what they're really about, like what their story is and why they exist. It's actually, a lot of companies know that 50 or 75%, but can't articulate it kind of 100%. And, those motivations and the real sort of the reason that they're there have big implications of, how they're going to communicate and market. The second piece, though, is that I think that even if you have a company that really understands why it exists and what it's for, or in the case of crypto, a project, it's really essential to understand what that set of beliefs and values, how they relate to the market narratives, the market conversations, right? Like there's no right or wrong. You can run directly into a market narrative or you can run directly against it, but you got to know what you're doing because otherwise it's going to be really hard to communicate, right? So the piece of marketing that I really like, or communications, is very foundational, and kind of, it tends to be at the early part of projects. And so, over the course of the last couple of years, I shifted from more traditional clients, like I was working with Verizon when they were trying to launch a new brand, into all exclusively crypto. And that was just a process of kind of moving my focus over there, finding projects that I liked and believed in to work with, and so on and so forth. And so that's kind of the pay the bills part is the communications consulting with a bunch of different projects. I guess as part and parcel of that, kind of my job, I think, is to understand what those overarching market narratives are. And so I spend sort of an inordinate amount of time just really kind of surveying the field and trying to get a sense of both, not just the news per se, but what the sentiment is and how that's changing. And so, I guess, at the beginning of the year, I was just doing some writing and things like that. But then I was noticing, and this is kind of a new phenomenon, that such a huge portion of the interesting conversations and insights in crypto that I was seeing were not coming from kind of traditional media outlets. So they were just thoughts that were jotted down to Twitter because it's such a fast, immediate medium. I don't know if it's just a matter of the time that people have to spend on something, like it's a lot easier to write a thread than an essay from a time perspective. Or if it was just, you're allowed to be a little less refined because if no one likes your idea, it just kind of floats away real quickly. But whatever it was, it felt like a lot of interesting insight that was being washed away too quickly. And so that's kind of what the genesis of Long Read Sunday was just I was sitting there, all week throughout the week in between actual working, tagging different things that threads that I thought were interesting. And so I was like, screw it, I'm just going to take a few hours each week and actually put this together. And then, people really responded to it. So it's become kind of a thing.
So I guess that's also become a useful tool for your work, right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at any given time, it's a chance for me to sit and actually ask that question of, where is the sentiment? What do people think about right now? What are they interested in? What are they not? So for example, like if you have a project launching right now, like you got to understand what people are and aren't interested in, because if you're going to try to drum up interest, I mean, there is no, there's right now the overarching narrative is sort of some combination of skepticism, cynicism, realism, and mea culpa, right? And so if you're introducing a project that doesn't really fit with that, like, boy, you better know how it's going to capture attention and how it fits within that, or how it makes an argument that that's not what we're, what people should be feeling, or roots out some set of people who feel differently, or whatever it is, So yeah, it's definitely useful for the actual, the put food on the table kind of work too.
And how do you balance the market narratives alongside your own personal opinions and views? And I'll give you an example of where, on a personal level, I'll face a challenge. So, for me to continue doing the podcast, I have to have advertisers, right?
Yep.
And I certainly have some people who will advertise me with projects that I think are going to fail. But at the same time, I'm not there to be judge and jury of whether they should fail. It's a free market. It's not an outright scam. So I'm like, okay, well then maybe I should take them on as an advertiser. But then at the same time, I have this kind of like ingrained fear that people are going to go, oh, you're a fraud, you're full of shit for taking that advertiser on board. So I have to kind of, I try and separate an advertiser from my own personal opinion. Do you have a similar problem where we're dealing with clients, or are you of the opinion that you'll just work with people?
So it's a really interesting question. I think there's a personal dimension, and there's also, it touches on a much bigger problem, which is the bigger problem of the context is the chaos inside the media model right now, and how you can how are we going to monetize what are theoretically or potentially more authentic, genuine, even if opinionated channels, without just turning into the same thing that we're trying to get away from, right? And this is something that I think there's not necessarily a good answer to. Like, there's a lot of important conversations we have to have, right? So I've been approached a couple of times with people being like, "Hey, you should start like a publication or a media network or something." And I don't know how, like, I would monetize it at a level that would justify external investment, like, while having integrity to what I would want to do with it, And I think I'm really glad that people like Mike and The Block are trying, because it's going to be really, they are going to have so many team meetings about the right way to, like, what's the right sponsor, what's a wrong sponsor, what are ways to have business models that aren't directly aligned with traffic. I mean, they're going to have to experiment with a lot, and it's only just in the last little bit that we're finally having the conversation about, the connection between the advertising business model and media in general. So there's a much larger conversation there. In terms of me personally, I do actually struggle with the same question. Certainly, for me, it's a little bit different because there's never any promotion built into to anything. I'm not charging for any promotion, right? I'm charging for work that gets done in terms of strategy and writing. And I think that the nice thing about that for me is that, so one, I think that you and I both agree that if something's just an outright scam, we're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole, or even if it's like, there's a lot of people who are kind of like, the line's blurry, but not that friggin' blurry, right? So there's that whole side of things. I think the harder thing is there's a lot of projects that are maybe, one of us isn't sure of the likelihood for success or think they're maybe going to fall into some of the other traps. I think that the interesting thing for me is that depending on when I'm brought in, there are often opportunities for me to help. Like if I'm constructing the sort of story right from the beginning, a lot of times part of what people are hiring me for is that I'm going to not look, I'm fortunate that I don't have to say yes to any one project or another because there's a sufficient amount of work out there. And so a lot of times the type of people who are attracted to working with me, they kind of want the grill, right? And a lot of what I sort of say is a value for me is that I'm going to be harder than like the critics that are going to be out there or the venture capitalists they're going to go pitch to. And I'm going to put on that hat. And so, I can potentially help orient a project that there's a lot of projects that are tipping on a line of like, could be really good or could go a direction that's a little bit more just like following the crowd. And sometimes there's an opportunity to help, but I think it's a challenge. It's a case by case thing.
Yeah. And then before we start talking about the marketing and creative stuff, because I do want to get into that with you, it might be a tough question. I'm not even sure if you'll answer it, but I kind of want to get your current view of the market. And I've kind of done my own quick one to give you an idea of the kind of answer I'm looking for. I'm kind of the position where Bitcoin is proven to me. It's not this project anymore. It's out there. It's being used. It's proven. It's got challenges like any other, but it's there. Whilst I initially didn't like stable coins, I had a really great chat with Zach Prince from BlockFi, and he explained to me how stable coins are a great fintech product for allowing people in emerging markets to borrow dollars who need them. And it's a way to transfer them and them to be able to get their local currency then into their bank account because they would rather borrow dollars than borrow from the local. And I was like, okay, I kind of get that. Because he said it doesn't make sense for these people to be holding Bitcoin at the moment, especially what's happened over the last year. I think until Bitcoin has Bitcoin has privacy, Monero has a definite use case. I think security tokens certainly look interesting, and there's certainly a use case for them. And I think there is something around non-fungible tokens yet to be proven. But, CryptoKitties, whilst it might have been very short term, whilst it might have seemed like a joke, a bunch of people used it and it was able to create a small economy around it. And by virtue of like having non-fungible tokens and stable coins, Ethereum therefore has a use case, although I still have questions about it. And then I think there's a shitload of junk. That's where I'm at. Although I've been heading towards the maximalism view, I still think there are certain use cases that exist or ideas that might prove to be successful long-term, either projects or businesses. So what's your kind of lay of the land?
Yeah, I think we're very similar in that, actually. I think that we have a strong, or certainly, rather than put words in your mouth, I have a very strong sympathy for Bitcoin maximalism, both because I agree with you. I think it's the only thing that's, saying anything is proven is a challenge in this space, but I certainly think that Bitcoin has demonstrated that there is a strong core of people who are very unlikely to let it die. And that makes it powerful in a way that no other things do. I think that it has a product market fit that others simply do not. That makes it a fundamentally different thing. And I'll get into some of the other stuff that I'm really interested in because I tend to be, I think it's a reasonable position to not be interested in anything else until things are proven. And this is, I think, what sometimes creates a tension. A lot of the smartest maximalists that I know, it's more that they it's not that they hate other things. It's just that they genuinely don't care, and that they believe that the non-sovereign money, uncensorable money, permissionless money is so important relative to other implications of these things that it's literally just insane for them for people to be spending time on other things and being distracting. And I think that a lot of the reaction that maximalists have to other projects, hold aside even the claims of fraud and things like that, is it's just they believe it's an energy drain away from the most important problem that they can imagine spending time on. And so it's to be critiqued. And I'm sympathetic to that view. In fact, I think it's one of the things that makes Bitcoin strong. Now, for me, I think that part of why I spend a lot of time on Bitcoin versus just the rest of crypto as well is that I tend to agree with the implications of a non-sovereign money and a sort of a truly uncensorable money or an unseizable asset is so profound, especially kind of giving my background of, looking at history, the history of atrocities and, governments behaving badly and things like that. I do think that it's an unbelievably important use case. I also find myself really interested in a lot of the other implications of things that are out there. So I would say, after Bitcoin, I'm really, really keep a close eye on the privacy space. I don't necessarily yet have a horse in the race about, whether it all just gets ultimately incorporated into Bitcoin, or whether there are really kind of separate, currencies for different use cases. My guess is that there's some small spectrum, but I kind of think it doesn't matter right now because we really need people experimenting with different approaches to privacy. Like I think that, on a mass scale, we haven't even begun to contemplate the surveillance, the implications of sort of easy surveillance that are already here and are coming more. So I'm super interested in the whole privacy space. I think that the whole programmable open finance, smart contracts layer, I do think that there's going to be really interesting things that come out of that. I don't know which ones they are. I think that there's going to be a massive battle for which platform, that actually works with. That's going to, I think it's such early days, whether it's Ethereum or EOS or something that hasn't even launched yet. I just don't think that, I think that you could certainly point to advantages, but there's the smart contract space is going to be a completely full spectrum of every variable that can be tweaked and compete for developers based on how they fiddle the knobs is going to be, and we'll see what comes out of it. I'm excited that people are trying it. I do think that there are, I don't know. I'm generally supportive of people trying to create alternatives to the centralized sort of tech giant infrastructure, even if we haven't even begun to to do damage in that space yet. And then I guess I'm just to kind of be inclusive of the other one that you mentioned. I am keeping an eye on NFTs. I think for me, it's my interest in that is really, it seems kind of crazy to me that people wouldn't experiment with actual digital ownership in a different way. I think there are questions about how much it's actually achievable, and whether you really own things or not. But I think it's going to be exciting to see, I don't anticipate existing game titles that have profited very handsomely from, in-game totally controlled economies to all of a sudden flock to sort of open things that are expandable across title. What I anticipate is people taking advantage of kind of the new model to design different types of games and experiences. And I think where the rubber really hits that road in that space, if it's going to happen, is when we start to see virtual worlds and virtual reality spending actually competing for our time and attention with the real world, which I feel like is an inevitability.
Yeah, so I'm with you there. So when I was out in LA, I met the CEO of Wax, and he was explaining to me about in-game items, which I was kind of aware of. And then he explained to me that, for one game, they had this limited edition gun. I can't remember the game. It was $37,000. And somebody paid for that. And I was like, what? Somebody spent $37,000? And he said, look, you got to understand, what's your hobby? What do you like doing? Some people like playing golf, and they will buy the best golf equipment and pay for the best courses. Other people like to just play online games. That's the world they live. And they will buy that stuff. And I was kind of like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Okay, I understand that. And then he said to me, one of the things about having things like this represented on a blockchain, which I was always kind of skeptical, is he said, you can now guarantee that person, they are the one person who owns that, and they can trade that item. I was like, okay. And then he was talking about, it might have been somebody else actually, who then said, okay, take yourself forward a few years. Think about where SimCity is now, where computers are. Now think yourself 10, 20 years, almost like Ready Player One. People might want to buy artwork to have on the wall in their virtual world. And he said, this is the future we're preparing for. So I was kind of like, yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think for me the reason that I'm more convinced of the sort of virtual reality item integration is that I think that it feel like I said, I could be totally wrong, but it feels inevitable to me that for some meaningful portion of the population, they'll find that they enjoy interacting in that sphere more than they enjoy interacting in the real world. I mean, that's what Ready Player One was about, right? And I think it's, I don't think it takes a profit to see the implications of that. Like most of us, there's a lot of us that live lives of quiet desperation, right? And that sort of escapism is going to be a real thing. So I feel like status, I guess what it comes down to me is that status is likely a bigger driver than utility. And so once there are like environments in which status is a more, where digital objects can intersect with status in a more meaningful way, such as you actually inviting people back to your digital house on a virtual reality or whatever, I think you're going to see more of it there. I think that the challenge with games is, Magic the Gathering comes up a lot as an example that people point to, like the Black Lotus, which can go for, $25,000, $35,000. Even I think one is on eBay for like $100,000 right now. But that's a game that has it's literally celebrating its 25th year, right? Which is, there's almost no games in the history of the world that aren't just like Monopoly and things like that have been played for 25 years. It's really very unique. And so, I'm a little bit more skeptical that right out of the gate, just Hearthstone or whatever Magic where you can own the items, will matter that much to people. I don't know that it's that much different to have like the perfect clarity there versus, just an asset that you can change, but who knows? I'm going to be excited to see. I think it'll come down to a question of like what talent moves into that space and what they do with it.
Yeah. Are you a gamer?
So it's actually the Magic example. It's the only game I've ever loved. Like when I was 9 years old, I had a friend who was like, we were way into baseball cards, and he was like, "You're going to be obsessed with this game." And I was like, "No way, man. That sounds like a stupid waste of money. You'll never get me into that." And then like 3 months later, I was totally obsessed with it. I played Magic from like when I was at like 94 to 97, and then sold all my cards to buy a guitar, which kind of put the kibosh on that. I only started playing casually a couple years ago. I realized my brother-in-law, who was not yet my brother-in-law at the time, had played when he was a kid. And so the first Christmas I went home with my wife, I was like, I wonder if this game is still fun. And we tried it out as adults, and it's a great time. So that's like the only game that I've ever really had a strong affection for. I've never been a video gamer or anything, but I spent a lot of time around the culture of it because I think people still underestimate esports as a cultural phenomenon and an economic phenomenon.
Oh, it's blowing my mind. And, like I said, I've got a 14-year-old son, and he will sit and play FIFA. And while he's playing FIFA, he's got his phone out with YouTube with other people playing FIFA or talking about how they're playing FIFA. Or if he's not playing FIFA, he's then on Twitch watching people playing FIFA. It's just, and then I was hearing about this big event in London where people were competing for, I can't remember if it was hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds, but like it's huge, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think the first officially sanctioned high school esports team that's like an official high school thing just happened. There's a startup out of Silicon Valley, or maybe it's out of LA actually, that's doing that now, that's trying to get schools to recognize it. And like it kind of, I mean, people are kind of gobsmacked by the idea of kids sitting and watching people play these games. But like, I mean, honestly, if you look at why sports were like, there's a direct connection between how much people like watching sports and how much people participate in sports at home, right? So games, like they cut that down even more, right? Because one, you can go from watching to playing. You can do them simultaneously, and B, you can, even if not, you can do it right after. So there's no like barrier between those things. Second, it's a fundamentally interactive thing. Like if you watch people streaming, the community that's there in chat is throwing in they're saying, do this, not that, play this, not that. And it's much more participatory. So, I mean, if anything, we should be very excited about Twitch because it's making video games a much more social experience than they were in kind of like the dystopian world of pre-Twitch,
Yeah, I'll tell you a little secret. I've not told many people this. When I think I was about 23 or 24, the alternative to FIFA was a game called Pro Evolution Soccer. And it was kind of the gamer's game because it was the high quality of the playability. And I went to there was a big tournament in Birmingham, like the national tournament. And me and my brother went along and I lost in the final.
Oh my
Took it all the way
God.
I know. It was devastating, actually, because the winner got flown out to Corsica for a week and got to play in the World Finals, and I lost 2-1 in the final. I was devastated.
Man,
Yeah.
you're ahead of
Yeah.
your time. You're ahead of the curve there.
Next up, I talked to Nathaniel about the problems with crypto marketing and how much work goes into preparing his long read Sunday. But before that, I have a message from my show sponsors. Okay, so again, a final shout out to Deribits for the month, the Bitcoin exchange for traders. Have you checked them out yet? I mentioned they're growing insanely fast. This is all down to how they focus so much on building the best exchange possible. They've made security central. They've never once been hacked. Their platform is built for stability, so they don't have these system overload crashes like you see on other trading platforms when the prices go crazy. They can easily support high frequency trading. They allow for instant withdrawals, and they have never once had a socialized loss. All that is pretty cool, right? Right now, they are a Bitcoin-only futures platform offering up to 100x leverage for you crazy leverage traders out there, perpetual contracts with up to 100x leverage too, and they are the only liquid Bitcoin options market in the world. Okay, so go check them out. If you want the 10% discount for your first 6 months trading, head over to deribits.com with an S. That is DERIBITS.com. And please note, Deribit is not available for US citizens. And next up, my regular sponsor, BlockFi. As I mentioned, I recently visited their office in New York. I met up with their founder and CEO, Zach Prince, really great guy. And do make sure you go and check out that interview because I found out so much more about the business, which I didn't really understand. I just thought of them as this kind of loans business, but actually they are trying to reshape the future of banking and crypto. It's super interesting. Their primary product is crypto-backed loans. I mentioned that. You can use your Bitcoin, Ether, and Litecoin to access dollar loans. And they are the leading crypto to USD lender in the US with interest rates starting as low as 7.9%. They do have a special offer for the listeners of my podcast. If you sign up at blockfi.com/whatbitcoindid, you can get $25 in free crypto added to customer collateral loans for under $10,000, or you can get $50 in free crypto added to customer collateral loans over $10,000. And applying takes less than 2 minutes. And look, even if you're not interested in a loan, they're worth checking out as a company. They have so many interesting products and services coming soon. You can follow them on Twitter, on Facebook, or LinkedIn. You can sign up to their Telegram group or even for their newsletter, which I signed up for, by the way, because I much prefer to get my news via email. But yeah, go and check them out on their website. There's links to all that in the show notes as well. Definitely worth following. Definitely worth keeping an eye on what they're up to. All right, man. Well, listen, look, I want to talk to marketing about you because I feel like sometimes I'm a lone voice trying to talk about this. Sometimes I feel like it's not covered enough.
Yeah.
There's kind of that thing in crypto where it's like people can turn their nose at you if you try and sell something or if you're making money.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that weird place. But in the end, like pretty much all these projects are going to die if they don't market themselves or make money. And I think it's an important issue. And I've always said like advertising isn't intrinsically bad. Mm-hmm. It's some of the things you advertise in the way you advertise, but actually everyone relies on modern communications. I mean, Bitcoin has relied on word of mouth, which is a form of communications. So, and I feel like it's pretty much ignored, but it'd be good to hear your view. So like when I started in advertising kind of 20 years ago now, I started out just building websites, but by the time I'd left, I was a planner, and marketing wasn't just about driving awareness. It actually became about brand. It was about outreach and driving awareness, but it was also about product design, UX, and customer service. Marketing ended up becoming anything which was about the experience of the customer, whatever touch point. Similar views?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that's, I mean, I think that there's a lot to unpack here. One thing, I think that the part of the animosity of the crypto space to thinking about marketing has to do with how much of the marketing that people have perceived over the last 2 years being marketing to retail investors, this new category of investors, to participate in the purchase of tokens, right? So it wasn't like all of a sudden there were 1,000 products that people were shilling you to do, or even things to buy that were, value additive, right? It was people saying like, here, let's sell you on a vision of the future. Basically, it was a very uncomfortable combination of like aggressive marketing tactics and fundraising. And there's not really a precedent for that, other than really kind of gnarly stuff and snake oil salesmen from the 20s and things like that. I mean, there's a reason that it feels bad. So I think that we're still kind of almost like letting that get out of our system. Like the bad taste in our mouth is still there, but it's draining finally. And I think that it'll be very different, I imagine, as more actual products come online. that are things that people can use, how people perceive marketing in crypto. Like, again, there's no, like, I would argue that there's not a single agency actually dedicated to the marketing of crypto products specifically. There's a number of crypto marketing agencies, but their entire focus was on being good at token sales, right? Because that's the state that things were in. There's so few products now, but I think that it's probably inevitable that changes. I also think that you have, again, going back to kind of like maximalism here, maximalism is, or the sort of the Bitcoiner community. Let's use that because maximalism can be pejorative, and that's not how I mean it. But the Bitcoiner community has kind of this brandless thing going, right? Where right down to the mythology of an anonymous founder. It's been the thing that didn't need like its marketing is much more evangelical, word of mouth, apostles. Like it's much more akin to a social or religious movement in terms of its marketing than a product. And I think that part of what I hope happens is that when we are speaking about the crypto industry, we're really talking about a lot of things. We're talking about like a small, tiny handful of protocols that are competing to be some sort of base layer of either, money or store of value or, computational distribution or whatever. And then a ton of things that are going to sit around it. And I think that, those are very different types of marketing conversations to have about like, how are we selling this product? Like, the Casa Lightning node, right? Like at some point they're going to market that, like, and it might not need it for a while because there's such a powerful community of advocates and people who put little lightnings, next to their Twitter handles and stuff. And that's awesome. But for any product that wants to be mass market and frankly, like Casa should want everyone in the world to be running, a full lightning node. That's real decentralized power. And there'll be, let me say this. My guess is that the right type of aligned marketing partners come along that just kick the shit out of everyone else in terms of how they perform for that community, right? And then eventually figure out how to bridge into other sort of mass market things. Like I'd be very surprised if you see, a company like Casa going to a big traditional advertising and marketing agency to kind of build their slick materials. It'll be a group that comes maybe with this background, but is a little bit more crypto native, who understands like the values and priorities of this space and can communicate to that and can actually sell and push things without being shilly and stupid. That's my guess.
Well, it's funny you should say Casa because I've listed who I think get it in the space. And whatever you think of Coinbase understand marketing. They understand UX. They kind of understand customer service. But one of the reasons I think they became the kind of one of the biggest exchange, from certain ways you look at it, is the user experience.
100%.
It's just a great user experience. And then I had Casa, because I think the work they've done on product design, the node looks beautiful. Their website is beautiful. I spoke to Jeremy quite a bit about this, and that wasn't by accident. Everything they've done is on purpose. I also got Arbor in there. I think Arbor, I don't think they're doing as good a job as the other guys, but then it's very easy to pick so many companies or projects that don't get it, and they seem to not get it on many levels. So I think one of the sad things is that crypto enabled people to raise money for projects which would never have got financed by venture capital. Mm-hmm. Just ideas that aren't necessary. I think they don't get the kind of math of it all. Is that you've got to be building something that it's not always solves a problem, right? It's got to be something that people will use. You've got to be able to get a user base to it. You've got to be able to create an economic model that will survive. And there seems to be that whole thing's lost. And one of the biggest shames is it's almost like nobody read the Lean Startup.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've... I've read it like 3 times.
Yeah. Listen, I agree. I think it's interesting. So I would say that I've been a little less freaked out by the mass failure of companies in the crypto space than some others. My general feeling is that one, like starting a company is one of the absolute hardest things you can do. You have to do so many things right while also being correct about what you're offering and whether there's a real need, and timing as well. I mean, it's just insanely difficult. And like when people bandy about these statistics of, 90% of companies fail, that's total bullshit. 99.99999% of companies fail. If you include in that companies that never get to real venture capital financing, or companies that, raise a small seed round from 3 angels that they know, but never really make it beyond that. Or especially if you include just everyone who tries to start something, like it's enormously difficult. And I do think that, I don't know, the ICO phenomenon, we're going to be looking back and examining it for a really long time. But I think that it was a perfect storm type of thing. On the one hand, you had the ability to print money for the first time, which is crazy, and created a non-dilutive form of capital. And that's something that is amazing. I mean, if you're a founder of a good project and someone says you can raise $10 million for 20% of your company, or $10 million for nothing, like that's a hugely powerful thing. And frankly, I think that, even choosing to believe the best of intentions of a lot of the project leaders who genuinely were excited about, or are excited about, the potential for tokenization to change how value is exchanged, like that's still very difficult to turn away from, right? So you have that on the one hand. On the other hand, you also have what I believe is 2 decades or more of pent up demand for people to participate in these technology companies that they see reshaping everything around them, that they've been hearing about since the late 90s, that they've been systematically cut out from because you're not allowed to invest in them, right? Like people, I think, are everyone is not beaten down by the world yet, and they want opportunities to participate or feel like they have a stake in their own future. And that can be manifest really kind of shittily as like, just purchasing lottery tickets or whatever, or it can come out in other ways. And I think that the ICO boom just happened to perfectly intersect with that pent-up demand for the ability to, invest proactively in something that may be there for the future. And it ended up with a lot of people who, listen, like even venture capitalists aren't good mostly at being venture capitalists. If you look at the historic rate of return for the vast majority of funds and individuals, and frankly, I believe that, I've spent a lot of time, I know a lot of these folks, and the best ones are humble enough to know that there is a lot of right place, right time, know the right people involved. So, yes, there was not a gauntlet for there was not a pressure cooker to force companies or projects to be their best selves on their way to a lot of capital raised. And because of that, the vast majority of things are gonna perish in the fire.
It's almost like we had to go through this though. Like if you're going to create a new form of digital money that anyone can create, there are going to be charlatans, but people with like genuine intentions who are going to just create things. And it's almost like we had to go through this to find out what works, what didn't work, where regulations are needed, if you believe that regulations are important. It's similar to almost what happened with the .com crash. The comparisons are always there, and I don't always see it as the same thing like some people do. But at the same time, there was a lot of things learned from the .com crash. The kind of businesses that should be built. I always look at I don't know if you remember Webvan. They raised like 800 million.
Yeah,
800 million, and it's tried to build that whole infrastructure out, and then didn't have the demand. And that's why I'm such a big fan of the lean startup, because it's kind of like, just start small. What's the minimum? And it was very interesting actually when I was interviewing. Again, I'm mentoring Zach at BlockFi the other day, but he said to me, they financed the first bit themselves, and all they created was a website where you could apply for a loan if you want it. None of the back end. But I was like, okay, you've clearly read the lean startup. But it's all. I almost think Eric Ries should do a crypto version of the lean startup.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that is demand assessment and generation. It costs them so little to determine if there's an actual interest in pent-up demand. I mean, I think that actually in some ways the phase that we're entering into now, as the truly bad actors leave the space and the SEC plays its role with just sort of straight up enforcement, I think that one of the challenges for us is not to throw out the experimental babies with the bathwater of some of these projects. Like I think that it is, the idea of networks that require work and participation from users to be secured and to be kind of valuable and new ways to distribute value is really interesting. What's seemed pretty clear so far is that doesn't interact well with giving the ability to just buy, like purchasing a part of the network is not the same as building that proportional part of the network. Like owning 10% of the tokens of a network is not the same as contributing 10% of the work needed to make the network work, you know? And I think that one thing that's interesting, actually, I will share with you. I spent a lot of time kind of watching what people are interested in, you know, from long reads. So I can see obviously the stats on all the Twitter thread. I think the email clicks are actually a little bit better barometer of what people are really interested, though, because, you know, when it comes to the Twitter thread, so much of it's like who retweets what and you know, where in the sequence of the long reads it is and things like that. But email, you know, it tends to be a much clearer story of which things people find interesting. And then anytime I post something about kind of generalized mining or these other types of network building activities, mining 2.0, whatever it is, it's always one of the most clicked things. Even if it's like some weird Boric esoteric case study that I think isn't going to really hit, people are really interested. And I think that has to do with the idea of people are the crisis of trust with institutions is growing. The idea of decentralized alternatives, whatever that word means or has ceased to mean, is still there. And the idea of being able to participate meaningfully in an alternative future that isn't controlled strictly by the institutions that surround us is still really there. So it'll be interesting to see how people make good on that, you know?
Do you have any specific projects you like, or maybe a different way to ask this is like, and I've written down mine here, so I've got them here, but like, do any projects particularly stand out to you as something that you would hang your hat on and say, I think this might be here in 5-10 years time, outside of Bitcoin?
I would say I have more confidence in categories than I have in projects. So I, for example, like here's one that we haven't mentioned yet. I do think that tools for decentralized organizations are really interesting. I think that, especially coming out of like a background with social movements and things that spin up and then get spun down again, like the traditional kind of legal structures are overly burdensome. They don't make sense. They don't make sense for a highly kind of engaged but low attention, you know, quotient digital contribution network. So I'm really interested to see like people like Colony and Aragon and what they do with it. I have no idea about, I mean, those projects may find that they actually add more burden than is necessary. And really all that's needed is a way for kind of attribution of work to be distributed around whatever the dominant, you know, token of value is, right? Like it really could be that, yes, we should have decentralized organizations, but all you need is a simple voting infrastructure and a simple way to distribute funding. There's a project actually around those lines. It's really very a project. It's not a company that's raised money, but it's called Moloch, that a bunch of the Ethereum community guys, including Amin from Spank Chain and Austin from Gitcoin, have spun up. It's one that I'm watching because I think it's interesting. So I think that it seems highly unlikely to me that there aren't new ways of semi-formal organization for internet communities that have a better infrastructure. I just don't know what it looks like, but I'm watching that. Like I said before, the privacy stuff I think is hugely important. So that's something that I'm highly supportive of almost any like sincerely intentioned project in that space. So I'm watching, you know, obviously Zcash and Monero. I actually love that they're totally different sort of organized teams. They represent really different things. Like, you know, I love that those two projects are sort of leaders in the space. I'm watching both of the major implementations of Mimblewimble right now, Grin with one and Beam, I think is the name of the sort of other one. And they're very, very different approaches to it. So that's another category. But I'm really interested in people being paid differently for work and small contributions. And that's not necessarily micropayments or anything as simple as that. But I don't know. I think that the nature of work is highly likely to shift, and the way that people contribute is highly likely. And we've already seen a pretty serious fracture of the one job, one income, one kind of life paradigm. So we'll see what happens there.
So I agree with you on the privacy side of things, and I've got an area I want to explore on that with you as well. I'm very interested in Brave, and I'm kind of interested in BAT, but I do understand some of what the Bitcoiners say about the token, but it's not entirely flawed yet, whilst some very smart people will intelligently argue it is. My example being is, so I'm a content creator, right? I will survive based on selling ads and people sign up on my Patreon and various different things. I signed up to BAT because I was interviewing Brendan Ike. So I just went through the process. What did I think of the UX? Totally forgot about it. At the end of the month, I got an email from Brave saying, or from Basic Attention Token saying, you've received something like $50 from of BAT, which is automatically converted into the dollars, which I can withdraw. And I was just kind of like, well, that's kind of cool. I think they're going to struggle to get people to use it, and I think they'll struggle with adoption. But it still proves something to me that there is an idea there. I actually quite like the thought of the merge between Brave and a privacy currency for anonymous shopping online. I think that's a really interesting thing. And I'm with you on Grin and Beam. I've got the Grin guys coming on soon, hopefully. So.
Oh, awesome. That's super cool. I will definitely be listening to that. Yeah, I think that the BAT Brave thing is really interesting. I like, again, you'll probably notice that I tend to be a lot less cynical than a lot of folks, just because I think shit, man, after spending a decade in Silicon Valley where we were just trying to Uberize everything, it's such a breath of fresh air to be, I don't know. I feel like I just insta filter and censor all the stupid people, the shit that's just so irrelevant or money grabby that who cares. And what's left, even if you don't agree with everything, is tons of really smart people who are thinking about very interesting things. And I think that Brave, what I like about BAT as a token, if we're going to have some experiments, is that you can't really knock the credentials of the team. It's a working product with lots of users. It's a thing that people have wanted for a really long time, and they're making a real go at it. And I think any time when we have a project that will provide a pretty strong answer to one of the big questions in our space, it's an exciting thing to watch. I think a good example of that is okay, so let's play out the scenario. And this is, there are two arguments for what happens in a world of a million tokens, right? In the inevitable kind of the tokenization of the world. One is everyone converts automatically to Bitcoin or whatever the best store of value is, because you'd be insane not to, because why wouldn't you? Which is the kind of the hardest money wins, the best money wins kind of argument. The other scenario that is at least possible, if not necessarily plausible, is that people laziness can happen in two ways. One, everything could auto convert into Bitcoin. The other is that you could just have wallets that through UX, you sit with your balances of different tokens and you don't care what you're holding it in until the last second, because it converts into whatever you need at that minute. And I think that, let's put it this way. If there was an Amazon token, I think that the average US citizen spends $700 a year on Amazon and the average Prime member spends $1,400. That's such a high amount of money. Do you really are people just going to leave money in their Amazon tokens account or are they going to are they going to choose a wallet that auto converts it into Bitcoin because they think Bitcoin's going to get the sort of the best continuous kind of growth and value, or are they going to leave it in their wallet that converts it to Bitcoin when they need it without them being seamless? And I think that I don't know. It might, the version that assumes that it all gets auto converted to Bitcoin makes a total sense if everyone knows that there's one money over here that they believe is going to accrue more value. I just think there's at least a reasonable chance that a lot of people are lazy. They don't think in terms of, value accrual and what's the best place to keep their assets, and do whatever the UX of the wallets do, which is why I think the UX of wallets is so important. So anyways, this is all a long-winded way of saying that with BAT, we'll find out, man, if they can make it work through their currency, and there's reasons that having a native token is valuable. It seems like a project where we're going to at least learn what it takes for that to be real. And if not, if they can't get it right, that's probably more evidence in the everything's just going to be the base money column, So either way, we learn a lot. So I think it's an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, conscious of time, we've done an hour already, but there are a couple of things I want to finish off with you. So I kind of want to get your view on the invasion of privacy from Silicon Valley behemoths, the Facebook, Google, this hunt for more and more data, what it means for people. Because from my side, I believe we're heading to a more anonymous browsing experience of the future. I think I think it will become something that it's not that people hunt out. Like I've hunted it out. I'm having a, by design, more anonymous browsing experience. Most people won't, but I think it could be built into future OSs. So I can definitely see a future where Apple builds in anonymous browsing into the OS by default. So what are your views on that, and how do you think this is going to affect companies and marketing? Because obviously you shared one of my articles about this in your long reads. I wrote about this. I think people are woefully prepared for what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I've shared it a couple times with you. There's an article from, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago by Ethan Zuckerman.
The Atlantic one.
The Atlantic one. It was a cover story called "The Internet's Original Sin," and Ethan Zuckerman was the head of MIT Media Lab, I think, at the time. Or no, he was at the Berkman Center. Now he's at the Media Lab. Some combination of those things. Anyways, dude has been around thinking about media for a long time, and he was involved in the very first display banners. And what he was, the point of the article was basically saying that it was a conscious choice. Now, it was based on constraints of the time and the medium, but it was a conscious choice that advertising would be the model for the internet. And on the one hand, I think because I'm a huge critic, I always try to keep the other hand in mind. There are a lot of things that have been able to be created because consumers didn't have to pay for them, right? And we can't sort of totally the paradigm where there was never an advertising based internet business model has probably a ton less of the things that we've come to know and rely on, right? Because we wouldn't have paid for them. So conscious of that though, I do think that the endless hunt for more data and the unholy alliance between technology companies and increasingly that includes everyone who's got a device that can have a sensor on it, and advertisers, is getting to the point where it's a real sociological cultural challenge that we have not grappled with, right? So, I mean, there are so many examples, they're too numerous to even get into, but just a couple from the last 2 weeks. You had a big interview with someone from Ford who was talking about just the amazing amount of data they have, because when you buy a car, you finance a car, which means they know your marital status, they know your income, they know your credit history, they know everything. And they're looking to that as a major business model in the future, right? So you have that sort of, these things, and that's, going to be the case for any company that has access to credit history is going to have similar kind of data. So you have that whole kind of the Internet of Things around us creates a new data collection, advertiser panopticon scenario. You have in the last couple of weeks a guy who built was one of the sort of instrumental engineers building the UI or the recommendation algorithm for YouTube, came out and pointed out this 20 tweet thread. It's one of the best threads I've seen in a really long time. How it has, the technology that he helped create has given rise to the flat earth movement, because flat earth videos perform really well on YouTube, which means they're targeted at people who are susceptible to, believing conspiracy theories, which then reinforces in the algorithm that's a good thing to try more and more people with. And it just creates this virtuous or non-virtuous cycle, I guess, from a societal level of what gets recommended. Basically the recommendation has no amount of, it doesn't have a filter for whether it's total bullshit craziness or not. you know? So you have that problem. You have just this week, Amazon, or last week during the fires, the pricing algorithms seem to be increasing the prices of things like ladders to get out of your house and shit. And it's like, this is AI acting badly, right? But these things are such fundamental, they are normative for the future that we live in. And I think that the thing that seems kind of scary to me is that it is so far beyond left or right politics, or really the structures that we have right now for dealing with problems. I mean, it's not even about conservatism versus liberalism, or progress versus golden ageism or whatever. Like, these things are default challenges of a world in which technology increases faster than our ability to culturally catch up with it. And I think that, to me, these are the fundamental kind of questions of the future, is what decisions we make about how to change this, And I mean, you're seeing the first kick of it now, but I don't know. It's not going to be just GDPR. It's not going to be Congress hauling in Zuckerberg to kind of slap him on the wrist or rock him around. Like, they're much more fundamental issues. And I think that we have to have a much broader conversation on a cultural level about what is and isn't okay. And I do think that the relentless fuel, like the business model for surveillance that can be used for ill, is advertising. There's no way to get around that. And we're all implicated in it. And every company is implicated in it. And it's I don't know who's the right person to make the first move. I think that it's really going to take a huge broad-based understanding. You're going to have to have government enforcement. You're going to have to, but at the same time, they're going to be using it to their own advantage, inevitably. And that's not even me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. It's just like, it's a reason the CIA funded technology forever, but you're going to have government enforcement. You're going to have citizens demanding other solutions and having their own sort of, privacy stacks and opting out of things, which means so much education and awareness and UX and all these things. You're going to have companies that stand up and stand for something different and give people an alternative. And it's not impossible, it's a shitty, tiny example compared to the world of problems, but REI, the outdoor gear and kind of apparel company, has made a real stance that they are not open on Black Friday. They shut down, they give everyone, they're something like 20,000 employees off. They encourage them to get outside, and it's a marketing stunt. Of course it is, but it's a marketing stunt that they believe in. And until you have companies actually saying that something has to give, you're not going to be able to get around it. Now, I think that the biggest challenge in this equation for me is I don't really see advertisers who have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders saying at any time soon that they want to target less, right? Having spent a lot of time with Coca-Cola is a company that is filled with good people who want that company to be the best version of itself. And probably, if they could, would, sell off all the fucking sugar water that they, sell and change it for kombucha or whatever in a second. But they still live inside a paradigm where they got to work whatever they can towards the middle. But that company, they're going to fire their CEO, their CMO, their whomever, if they're not performing on a quarterly basis. And so if you have a platform that's willing to sell, last mile in CPG is a huge problem. It's something that I'm sure you had dozens of projects that you were thinking about. How do you get how do you get people to insta buy, Oreos right when they're hungry on the internet? Anyways, these problems are, the boardrooms and stock markets are going to demand answers to those problems, and it's going to continue to create a business model for people to sell data. So I don't know. I think I am neither purely cynical nor am I particularly hopeful in this. I think that the best thing we have going for us is ease of user experience around privacy integrated technology. That's, if there's any one of these equations that I'm the most hopeful for, that's it. Because I do think, the number of people who have downloaded ad blockers, whether it's from a moral stance or just because ads are a shitty addition to their user experience, is a positive sign for me. And I think that, I guess, the one other really interesting X factor and elephant in the room is that when you sell real things for big margins, you can afford to take a privileged kind of moralistic stance on privacy, which is exactly what Apple is doing, you know? And it seems to me that Apple is starting to flex a little around the idea of like they can smell the blood around companies that are competing with them in different areas because they make money from selling devices and hardware and things that you know, they can afford to take that stance. And maybe total bullshit. I don't think that the executives at Apple are necessarily particularly better than the executives at Facebook or anywhere else. But I think that another piece of this whole equation is market forces. And to the extent that you have big, giant companies like Apple saying that there are real limits to what should and shouldn't be allowed, you know, because of social consensus around data and privacy, that makes a huge difference in the markets.
Yeah, do you know what though? I do believe Tim Cook is probably a good guy.
I think so too. I think that you, let's put it this way: if you're a top flight engineer in Silicon Valley, you're going to have your pick. It's not like Apple and Google are going to say, "Piss off, you're a Facebook person." You know, like you're going to have the ability to head towards a company that you feel like aligns with your values. And so, I think one of the things that I've always felt is that even when things that are kind of, you know, might be decried as virtual signaling or marketing start, like what they do is there is actually a virtuous cycle where if you have a company that says, "Hey, we stand for this," even if the executives who are saying that are just doing it at that stage for a good marketing buy, the next generation of people who are deciding between that company and a company that doesn't stand for that, maybe they actually care about it. Maybe they actually recruited because there was a reason, right? And I saw this a lot inside like the Coca-Colas of the world, where like the higher up in the ranks you go, the less that they care about some of those impact things. But the more the next generation of talent who decides to go to them versus some other company, the more those things resonate. And so I think that you probably will see, if Apple really has a DNA of being concerned with privacy and opting out, you're going to see that accumulate over time as more people come in to reinforce that, for whom it's an even more real and profound thing.
All right, well, listen, look, last thing. This has been as good as I expected. You're probably the person who reads more than anyone else, right? You have to, by nature of having to do your long read Sunday. So come on. I certainly read a lot. I don't know if it's more than anyone, but I spend a lot of time looking at a lot of stuff. How long does it take you to prepare each one?
It's long, man. It's gotten longer too. So the process is kind of like, I mean, throughout the week in between things, I'm tagging things. And then usually kind of by Friday night, I'm starting to go through and curate, just move it into a document where I'm like, you know, kind of organize it into things that I think are most or, you know, less important. And then it's really what it comes down to is usually it's like Friday is the day where I kind of surface all the stuff and then go back and check a bunch of accounts who I know tend to have good stuff and see if I've missed anything. Saturday is a day where I kind of like outline it. And then Sunday mornings, when I actually write the thing. Writing the thing takes a lot longer. I always forget how long the actual writing piece takes, but I think that's the part of what people respond to is that like there is actually kind of a narrative flow to it. Yeah. It's not just a collection of links.
So that sounds like 15 to 20 hours.
It's probably a little bit less than that. It's probably closer to 5 to 10, but it's not nothing.
But then it deserves, you know, I'll push it back out. It deserves a lot more people to follow it because it is so useful. Actually, it's two things happen, right? I get it, right? And I get it on the Sunday, but I usually wait for the Monday. Actually, and funnily enough, I struggle with it in email form. I get the email and then I click on the link and go back to Twitter. I think I'm so ingrained in Twitter that I'm stuck into
it. I know, it really is. I haven't, just so you know, we're getting into the weeds a little bit now, but like I have not yet solved the right version of it for kind of an email. I think that people have responded well to kind of the shorter intro type summaries that I do, but it's definitely a Twitter native format. I mean, the thing is composed with Twitter in mind. It's designed with Twitter, and it is a little jarring when you get outside it. And, you know, maybe I think that I might have to experiment with like Substack or something instead of Review. Review's kind of limited in what you can do with it, but it's definitely it's a native Twitter piece of content that, you know, you take it out and it works, but it's not exactly the same.
But the other thing is also, like, I use it almost to filter and go, right, I want to read that, definitely want to read that I can skim read now. And I've never got on with anything like Pocket. I create a little folder every day that says read this today, and I just drag things in. So I can drag tweets or drag things. So I filter it like that. I think the other thing I do with it as well, this is going to sound really narcissistic, but it's like, did I make the cut this week? Like, is my shit in there? Which sounds awful.
That's been a fun thing. Like I've seen that a bunch, and I always like that. I mean, it's a little. I think that the hardest thing is
it's a badge of honor.
Yeah, well, and like I always try to. This is not like. I don't mind when people like if they share their own stuff with me, because it's like a lot of times it's like people spend a ton of time curating something. They're just looking for an outlet, and I don't think it's weird. I think that I'm the most responsive when it's like a kid who's kind of just like trying to get known for something, and they're like a lot of times they have really good thoughts, but like God, they write these awesome things that are not there, and that's not every week. It's probably only every few weeks, but I especially like it when that if anyone's listening who's kind of like. Young and upcoming, or it doesn't matter, young, there's no age barrier, but whatever, just like happen to just join Twitter or not have a lot of following, definitely hit me up. My DMs are open, and I try to do a good job responding, although I miss a lot of stuff, especially now with the baby.
Is there anyone who's standing out for you at the moment? I particularly like the work Hasu is doing.
Yeah, I really like Hasu. I think there's a few folks who are really good. Yeah, I'm always interested in what he writes. I think that he, I don't know him. I actually haven't ever had like a conversation with him outside of just a little bit of exchanging on Twitter. My sense is he's really, really animated by an intellect. Like he feels to me like much more than a lot of people. He comes into everything with a blank slate and really like it's just what makes sense to him that gets kind of spit out the other side. I think he's great. I think probably like if I had to like retire a jersey for someone who's almost like defaults to, make if they
I know who you're going to say.
If they write something, it's Nick. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say Nick.
It's just another person who like agree or not, like you literally, it's impossible to be intellectually honest and not take what he's writing seriously. All the time.
It's so beautifully crafted as well. Right?
He's also just a really good writer, which helps.
Yeah,
it's kind of an unfair good combination for people. But yeah, there's so much good stuff out there though. Like there's a lot that I think are still crazy under indexed. I mean, like the ZK Capital guys who are I think they're based around Northwestern a little bit. They're kind of all over though. I'm not even sure about exactly what their business model is, but those guys, whenever they do things, are really smart. I think there's so much good stuff. I think the challenge is that what I've found is that there are very few people who are, and this might be a constraint of the medium, who are really good at like you can't do too many threads. Like a thread like has to really come natively, or else like when I first started Long Read Sunday, I had kind of a goal to do like a long Twitter thread about a topic each week. And what I found, I had a couple that really, really hit. I had this one about sort of crypto asset networks replacing companies that really, really hit. But like it hasn't been time to do another thread on that topic since then. I had another thread on the topic of crypto M&A. Same thing. Like there hasn't been the right time to do another thread. So I think that it is a medium where if you try to force it too much, it doesn't necessarily hit. The legal scholar community on crypto Twitter is totally awesome. They're almost an insta include. Between Jake, Catherine Wu, Paley, like they're like it's so easy. Drew Henke's, they're like there's so many of them. Like I do a survey of them at this point around Preston. Like everything that comes out from a legal standpoint, that's a huge useful thing.
Yeah, Jake's great. His threads are incredible. I met up with him when I was in Washington for the Hester Peirce interview. I met up with him, went for 3 or 4 beers with him. He's a really great guy. Like if you get a chance to go to Washington and hang out with him, it's well worth it.
Yeah, no, it's again. I think the thing you see part of also like I weirdly feel like Twitter it's a better medium for assessing people's kind of personalities than essays are, right? Like essays are more refined, they're more polished. They're kind of like, they have an effect of of kind of homogenizing people a little bit, even if, some people can break out of that. But it's part of what I like. I like you'll often see when there's a piece of news, I'll take, alternate takes on it, because it's not about just the news. It's about kind of this person expresses this sentiment well, or, whatever.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, listen, look, we could have probably done about 3 hours without any problem.
Yeah.
This is already one of my longest ones. Fascinating. I knew it would be. Just a final question, though, before you tell everyone how to stay in touch. What are the key narratives that you think are emerging right now?
I think that right now, I've been thinking about this a lot, because I wrote this thing on token economy a couple months ago called the crypto narrative index. And I keep waiting for the right time to write the next one. And I keep coming back to what I feel like is happening right now is it's a collective release of breath, where we're just accepting that it really is going to be a winter for a little bit. And I don't think that's necessarily means that everyone's battening down the hatches, or, people are super scared necessarily. It's almost more this acceptance. There's this collective, the ICO phase is really and truly over in that first iteration. And maybe there are new things coming, right? Kyle Samani wrote a thread about why there's a new set of kind of token sale paradigms that's just around the corner, which I think is totally worth thinking about. But I feel like there's this this kind of collective release of breath that's going to create a lot of space for more interesting things to emerge. I don't think that it's that kind of everyone's dead, and that there's less kind of excitement. But it's quiet. It feels like, I don't know. It feels like it's 4 a.m. and it's not quite the time when the sun has started to rise, at the beginning of the morning. But it's that really cool in between mist where it's not far off, and you kind of are just waiting for it, and you're thinking about things. And so I don't know. I feel like there's less of a narrative than there is a sentiment right now, which is this transitional time. And, maybe part of this is, I could be reading into it because we just transitioned kind of from fall to winter, seasonally here, but it really does feel like, there is stuff coming. It's on the horizon. There are people building things. There are institutions coming. There are likely institutions accumulating quietly, but it's impossible to deny that an older thing has gone. It has fallen away, and we're kind of now figuring out what that means. So I don't know. I think that there's almost there's a quietness in a weird way to right now that I think is for those who are able to, or willing to, or interested in taking some time to reflect, is very cool, and going to kind of probably position us to be a little bit better in what comes next.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, this was great. Also, just a big thank you. You've been one of those people who's been a massive support in what I do for as long as I've known you. You're always sharing out my content. You're a patron. You've included me in your long reads, so thank you so much for that. I'm sorry I didn't see you in
No, that I have to say, that's, the metal t-shirts and background help, but that's all because of the quality of the content. I listen to a lot of different podcasts and just, accumulate a lot of media, especially with podcasts. It's, I have to be really choosy about what I listen to. And what I found is it really comes down to people are smart no matter where you listen, but the difference really stands out with the quality of the questions and the quality of the conversations. And I think there's a small handful of folks who are doing it really well. And you're at the very top of the list for me with Pomp and probably Eric Torenberg. So it's all well earned, and I really appreciate everything you do for the space.
Thank you, man. Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And listen, if you ever do Patreon, I'll throw your money straight back at you. We can just take out Patron's cut and swing money back of each other. But next time I'm in New York, we'll go and have dinner. We'll have a beer. We'll have a proper catch up. But I've really appreciated this. Just let everyone know how they can keep in touch with you, keep hold of you. You're one of those really annoying people who managed to get one of those old Twitter handles with 3 letters. I've got Twitter envy over that. But tell people how they can stay in touch and how they can follow Long Reads, Sunday and Long Reads Live, and everything you're doing.
Yeah, no, I'm easy. You can find me on Twitter at NLW. That's definitely the primary medium where I engage. And my Twitter bio is annoyingly full of links to all the stuff if you prefer long reads by email. Or I started doing a live YouTube show, which got a little derailed by the birth of the kid, but is hopefully coming back starting next week. We'll do a little season do a few weeks in December and then back in January. So anyways, all of that's available from Twitter at NLW. It's funny, I joined Twitter in 2008, so I was early, but not that early. Like, it was around for a while. And actually, funny story, Twitter spun out of Odeo, which was a podcast thing that Evan Williams was trying to do. And when one of the first project I did at Northwestern, we were like one of the first beta testers for the podcast software when we were trying to go all over the world in like 2005. So it didn't work that well because we didn't have the bandwidth. So it was kind of a failure, and I'm glad they made Twitter. But actually, the funny thing is that I think that just NLW is not a common combination of letters, because I still was able to get it like 2 years into Twitter's history. It's literally just me and the National Library of Wales. So it's funny. Like, sometimes I'll wake up in the mornings and see I'll be like, ooh, cool, 20 notifications. And it's all like some new dedication ceremony at the National Library of Wales. So that's, if you follow NLW on Twitter, you'll get that too.
Right. Well, I'll share everything out in the show notes. Thanks as ever. Really enjoyed this. Hopefully we'll do it in person one day.
For sure. Thanks, man.
Okay. Did you enjoy that? What did you make of that? Do you know Nathaniel? Are you following him on Twitter? Do you receive his Long Read Sunday? If you do, you probably know how cool it is. If you don't, seriously, come on, go check it out. Go and follow him. All the links are in the show notes. He does all the heavy lifting for you. He creates all the best news, blogs, and opinion. It is really useful. I can't see anyone not getting any value from it. So yes, go and check it out. Also, he's just a really good dude. I really like the guy. He's got a great taste in music, obviously, because he likes punk hardcore. And I like his views on the state of crypto. And I know that it doesn't wash perfectly with maximalists, but he's open-minded to other ideas and other innovations and testing things. And I think that's pretty cool. So sorry, maximalists, don't hate me for this. Also, go and check out the show notes for this episode. There are absolutely loads. I have them on the website. So if you go to the episode page on the website, you will find them there. Also, someone's reached out to me. They've offered to do some cool designs for some What Bitcoin Did t-shirts and hoodies, so I'm going to get a few of those hopefully and do a giveaway soon, which is pretty cool. I might even make them available to buy. I'm not sure why anyone would want to buy them or wear one, but well, yeah, maybe they will, so we'll do that. And listen, if you want to support the show, here are all the things you can do. Firstly, you can consider becoming a patron. I'm now over 40, which is super cool. So thank you to all the ones I have so far. And yeah, anyone who wants to become a patron, you got any questions, head over to patreon.com/whatbitcoindid. You can consider becoming a show sponsor. I've got a few inquiries now, so it's looking good. It looks like we might be fully booked through to February, which is like a huge relief because it means I can just focus on the show. But I think I've got one slot available. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch. I'm also looking to take bookings from February. Feel free to reach out to me on hello@whatbitcoindid.com. I've already broken through 100,000 downloads for November. Hopefully I'll do more in December. I might not do it with it being the holiday period, who knows, but yes, the show is continuing to grow and we're very, very close to having our 500,000th download. I'm not sure if you say it like that, but 500,000 downloads, which is utterly amazing. You can also leave me a review on iTunes, 5-star if you think I deserve it. Someone left a 3-star. But if you think it deserves 3 stars, do the same. But yes, reviews on iTunes are really helpful, and it's also really helpful if you click on the subscribe button, so please do that. Also, follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Medium, I'm at What Bitcoin Did on everything. Always there, happy to chat, reach out to me. You can check out my website, which is www.whatbitcoindid.com. Loads of useful ways to surf old episodes of the show. I think I'm going to do a company section as well soon, so keep an eye out for that. You can also sign up to my newsletter. I do a daily Bitcoin newsletter, which is just a curation of all the best content out there, podcasts, news, blogs and tweets. Check that out. That's on the subscribe section on my website, and you can share the show out with your friends and family, which is super helpful for me as well. Okay, thank you for all the support I continue to receive for the show. It's utterly amazing. I really, really do appreciate it so much. It's going really well. I've got so many people reaching out, offering to help in different ways, which is just super cool. So thank you so much for that. Okay, I hope you have a great week. If you want to reach out to me, again, my email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.